or what to have these guys. Literally, they knew that Asha was not showing up like this morning. Thank you, guys. And actually, what's going on is a great intro song to my talk, if I can move all this stuff without immolating myself. How is everybody?
Good.
So I'm very excited about what we're going to talk about today. My topic is called A Great Turning, or The Great Turning. And it's an event or an occurrence or just a fact that I've been thinking about for a long time, and I'm really excited to be able to share it with you. We're going to talk about it some more on Wednesday, so I invite you to our Community Circles group on that. It is a phenomenon, it is a global phenomenon of which we are a part. And I've gone up to various people and I said, have you heard of the Great Turning? And they go, no. And I explained it to them and they're like, yes, I understand that because I'm a part of it, or I see it, or I feel it. But it is a phenomenon, and individually and collectively, we here and all of us here, collectively and individually, are a part of it. It's a shift in global consciousness, and I'm going to get into that in a second. It's just a change in the way we look at our world, we interact with each other, and we look at each other in terms of relationship. One of the resources I've used for my talk today was an author named Joanna Macy. Has anybody here heard of Joanna Macy? I see some folks nodding. She is an environmental activist. She's a Buddhist teacher. She has been around for a long time and written a number of books. And she also worked on a film called, this will stun you, The Great Turning. So it's 26 minutes. I bought it, and I'm thinking of showing it to our group on Wednesday if anybody wants to come watch it. It's just a good conversational kickoff. And what we're going to do on Wednesday is, in our community circle, is we're going to talk about what we think about the Great Turning, what we see in terms of its happening, what part we play in it, and just how we see it projecting out over time. So let's talk about that. What is it that we're turning from, and what is it that we are turning toward in this great turning? We can all see from where we are that a lot of the way we are living in global community is not working. I think maybe our digital interconnectedness helps us see this. The 24/7 news cycle helps us see this. Just our own energy helps us see this. But a lot of the way we are living together in a national community and in a global community just does not seem to be working anymore. It doesn't seem to be sustainable in the long term. Am I the only one who feels that way? No, I think that's true. So we have instances of war, violence, competition for resources, which are ever diminishing. Refugee crises, human dislocation. There is kind of a zero-sum mentality out there that says, if I have that resource, I get it and it's not yours. There are values which dominate our culture, which are domination, exploitation, victory, violence, and just a totality of zero-sum thinking. That, in my view, and in the view of others who look to the Great Turning, just is not sustainable. You know, and sometimes it's hard to look at because we're so embedded in it. We look around. Have you noticed that sometimes you live in a culture and you don't think, is this really the way we should be working? Is this really what we should be doing? Because it's just normal. You just see it. And you don't even think, is this the way to live that promotes the human values that I espouse, that I individually try to live? Integrity, caring, compassion, kindness. Are those the values that I see around me in the greater world? Sometimes we just don't back up and look at that because we look at the greater world and we just think, oh, that's normal, that's the way it is. That's life. Well, what the Great Turning tells us is it doesn't have to be life. Joanna Macy teaches, and if you come see the movie, or if you read any of the books, you'll see this, that we are in the midst of what she calls the industrial growth society. We live in a world, and you tell me if you disagree, we live in a world where the metric of success is continued growth. The metric of success is continued accelerated growth. How excited do we get when the stock market hits 26,000?
Really excited.
You know, yeah, we get very excited. I know. But what happens? Do we think that's going to continue forever?
No.
Real estate prices, wage prices, especially in the United States, but maybe that's just the country I know best, I don't know. But it seems that our metric of success is continued growth, continued profit, continued expansion. Let's just ask, maybe that's not bad. The last thing I am is an economist, and I don't even play one on TV. But let's just think about this. Is that something that is sustainable? What happens if the stock market hits 36,000, 106,000, and we can't drink the water, we can't breathe the air, the glaciers are melting? Continued accelerated growth is not a sustainable way to go. We live in an Earth where we are depleting the resources faster than Earth can replenish them. What is the end game there? The only option we have is to come up with another way of being, another way of living globally, another way of living in community. It's interesting, but Joanna Macy says that one of she calls the pivotal psychological fact of our time is this. She says, all through the course of human history, we have had the truth in front of us that human life will continue. Life goes on. There may be plagues, there may be wars, there may be god-awful things happening, but we always know that life goes on, right? For the first time in human history, we are in a place where we can't say that. And she calls that the psychological trauma of our time. We are in a place in human history where we have the ability to make our planet so unsustainable we can no longer live in it. Or we have the ability to just blow each other up off the face of it. We've never had that before. And that is a truth with which we live, whether it's in our face or not. So what do we do about that? The industrial growth society is based on a paradigm of continued accelerated growth. Look at our corporate structures. If you are a corporate fiduciary, you are on the board of a corporation, what is your obligation? Is it to the environment? Is it to your customers? Is it to the future? Is it to the seventh generation, as we learn in the Native American tradition? No. Your obligation is to profits. It's to your shareholders. It's to make sure that you keep making money, even to the point that the environment is despoiled, or to the point that other stakeholders are not treated fairly or humanely, or all your employees get fired because it's much cheaper to hire part-time workers and stop them working at 30 hours so they don't get benefits. Have ever of us heard of that? Okay. That is a corporate culture in which we live. Is it bad? I'm not going to get into economic questions, but the point of my talk here today is let's just take a look and see if those values advance the human values that here in communities like One World we say we promote. So that is what she calls the industrial growth society. There are other writers, notably a guy named David Corbin, who writes a lot about the Great Turning. He calls it empire. He calls it the theory of empire. He says in the past many thousands of years, since the beginning of recorded history, we have had one empire after another, and it's been based on domination and submission and power. He says the empires of today are large multinational corporations. We can talk about that on Wednesday, okay? Because I am not against large multinational corporations. What I am for is the promotion of human values. And if those two things can live side by side, then that's wonderful. But anyway, that is the culture in which we find ourselves. And the point is, over the long term, we have got to come to a decision to live a different way. If we want to continue to promote human life, perhaps if we even want to continue to be here. Any system based upon continual growth is doomed to fail. Nothing expands and grows forever. So where does the Great Turning take us? It takes us to a place where a global shift in consciousness, starting individually, starting with little groups like ours, and other small groups all over the place, walk into the truth that the earth is a living, breathing organism. It is not a stockpile of resources that we can use to make ourselves wealthier, or a sewer where we leave them when we're done with them. It is a partnership with an earth that is sustainable. It's a way for us to live so that we can continue to thrive and still nurture and treasure our planet and each other. It is a change in consciousness as to how we live together in relationship with each other and in relationship with our world. She teaches that there have been 3 major human revolutions. Okay, this is the history portion of the lecture, okay? Because this is me, and I am Gruber Central. Okay, the first was the agricultural revolution, right? About 10,000 years ago. What happened? We started farming, we moved into communities, we built walls, we said this is mine, this is yours. We started bartering, we started trading, we became sedentary, we started building cities. City-states and cultures. We all learned about the agricultural revolution. Okay, the next one. 300 years ago, the Industrial Revolution, starting in England with the steam engine. What did this bring us? This brought us massive rates of change, because once we started learning that we could manipulate materials in new ways and we could start inventing new and wonderful devices, it just took off. In 300 years, we've gone from the steam engine to where we are now. It's just flat amazing. You hold in your cell phone the computing power that 50 years ago filled a room this size. It has been astonishing what human ingenuity has been able to do. That's the Industrial Revolution. It's not sustainable because, as I said, its continued accelerated growth requires us to continue to draw resources from our Earth faster than they are being replenished, and some just cannot be replenished. So the third revolution, which is underway now, is what some call the ecological revolution, some call it the necessary revolution, or some just call it the Great Turning. As we turn away from that industrial growth society and we move to an earth-based, human-based, sustainable culture with new systems, with new paradigms, in a way that enables us to continue to live that is sustainable over the long term. Author Paul Hawken calls it the largest social movement in history. Think about that. As you sit out there, think about what you've seen of people participating in the Great Turning. I personally think here at One World we're part of it. I mean, we may not manufacture things, we may not come up with new corporate structures, but it is a community of people who are dedicated to coming up with a paradigm of how to live together. Compassion, kindness, forgiveness, support. There are many different, whatever your gifts, there are many different ways to contribute and bring forward this turning. There's one author I read that calls the Great Turning the immune reaction of the Earth. The Earth's immune reaction to the viruses that are invading it. The Earth wants to live. It wants us to live. And so this energy is coming up that's saying, let's think of a different way to do it. Let's step into our higher consciousness and come up with a way where we can live together in partnership with the Earth instead of despoiling it and bleeding it, such that at some point it won't be able to sustain us anymore. The Great Turning is a shift. It's a turn away from that view to a new view. It's toward what Joanna Macy has called a life-sustaining civilization. And where do we see this happening? I mean, just think in your own mind. We see it everywhere. We see people starting food co-ops. We see sustainable gardens. We see new ways of gardening. We see people living together with different forms of currency, forms of barter. We see corporate structures where the corporate stakeholders are not just the shareholders. They're coming up with new corporate governance systems where the stakeholders might be the environment. It might be the customers. It might be whatever strikes that person's mind to come up with a more sustainable and human-friendly and earth-friendly culture. The story of the Great Turning is in our stories, our individual stories, how we plan to promote and live this new consciousness. There's a book that I saw, it's by two folks named Peter Reason and Melanie Newman, and it's called Stories from the Great Turning. This is great, because this is how the news gets around. This is not a movement of mega groups. You're not going to see people getting together in groups of 200,000 and 300,000 and say, oh, we're doing the Great Turning. It's from the ground up. It's individuals realizing I have to change. And when I change, my world changes. But when you go, for example, go to that book, Stories from the Great Turning, you see groups that, for example, take a garbage and cement-strewn back lot and they turn it into a community garden, and they turn it into a community center. You see a lady who got this cracked me up, she got a degree in fashion design, and her area of design was women's underwear. I am not making this up. So what she did is she came up with a way for everybody to manufacture their own underwear using clothes they have at home that they're going to give to Goodwill or they're going to do something with or throw out. She didn't want to use, for example, I learned a lot, organic cotton, because she learned that growing organic cotton uses a lot more water. And she didn't want to generate materials for these things, so she came up with a way to take what you have in your house and make it yourself. And she's got a thriving business doing that. There's a story of a guy who was a corporate lawyer who just could not live with the energy of that anymore, so he got into different businesses supporting the environment, and he came up with a company called River Simple, or he started working with a company called River Simple. And it was a way to make cars, but using a corporate governance system that was not the traditional one. And one of the stakeholders was the environment. One of the stakeholders was future generations. Think about that. I remember a while back I gave a talk and I was talking about the government, and I was saying, you know, we have offices in our government for all sorts of different stakeholders. I think the talk was on the seventh generation. What if we had an office in our government that represented the interests of 7 generations down on an environment? Don't do that, because it's going to harm the environment for 7 generations down. Remember last week Red Turtle was talking about that? That's the Native American tradition. In many Native American groups, every decision you make, you think about the impact of that decision on the 7th generation down. And it makes you think, do I want to build this plant? Do I want to dump that waste into that river? Because what's going to happen 7 generations down? In the new Great Turning Society, one of the stakeholders would be future generations. Is something we're doing now serving them or harming them? That's a good question to ask. I remember I read a book by Jack Kornfield. I think the name of his book is A Path with Heart. You all know that book? Mm-hmm. He says, whatever path you pick, make sure that it is a path with heart. The Great Turning is a series of endeavors by groups, by small groups, by individuals, of undertakings with heart. And one of the things Joanna Macy teaches about this, and this is an important point, is that when you do this, when you undertake a project, or when you listen to your dream, and you say, I'm going to step off the main track, and I'm going to do this because I see that it leads to a more sustainable world. I see that it leads to a better world. We are not sure if it will work. We are not sure if it will succeed, but that's okay. It doesn't mean don't do it. It still calls for us to do it. She has a concept she calls active hope. She says hope is a verb. And this active hope is going to take us from looking at a world through a prism of overwhelm and despair. What do I do? The world's such a mess. I can't even get out of bed in the morning. To a world where our hope makes a difference. Because we are building structures that work. We are putting our loving energy into making it better. And even if you don't succeed, even if the project that is your heart child doesn't succeed, you have still made a difference. Because your energy has contributed to that growing global energy of change and connection and relationship and sustainability. So if you have a project in your heart, she teaches, don't second guess. Don't say, I can't do this because it won't work. Don't say, I'm not sure this is going to be a success, because that's the way of fear and that's the way of limitation. The Great Turning calls on all of us to use our gifts and say, this is my vision and I'm going to start. Because what do we know? We practice the law of attraction here. What do we know? We know that when we believe and we take action and we put our heart into it, the universe responds and miracles happen. So we don't stop ourselves because our relatives tell us, man, you really need to go to law school and do something safe. No, my dream is to build cars. My dream is to work in the environment. My dream is to build a garden where I see a cement plot. and I'm going to make my part of the world better. And when I do, it will contribute to that global consciousness, making all of it better. So Joanna Macy teaches that there are 3 dimensions to the Great Turning, because it's easier to think of it this way. One dimension is activism, and we saw that yesterday. We saw marches in Atlanta. We saw marches all over the country. It is standing up to protect what needs to be protected. It's a rear guard action, a delaying action, saying, no, you're not going to take this away yet. This is a value, and I am standing between you and it. That can be exhausting. It may not work, but it's necessary. And that may be your gift. The gift of activism, the gift of just getting up, as John Lewis says, my favorite representative, he gets up and he says, just get in the way. Just get in the way. And that's what people are doing all over the place. The second prong of the great turning is building sustainable structures, because it's not enough just to say, I don't like this. We have to come up with new structures where this new paradigm can flourish. New corporate structures, new governmental structures, new interpersonal structures, maybe even new housing structures. Maybe instead of everybody living in their own house, we live in groups. I don't know. But there are structures that will make this new paradigm flourish. And in connection with that will help us flourish. And it's our job to come up with them from our heart, leading with our heart. Okay. And the third is a shift in consciousness. The third is the paradigm of looking at the world through a sense of connectedness, looking at the world through the truth that everything is connected. Everything is connected. And notice I didn't say we are all connected, even though that's true. I say everything is connected. Instead of looking at the earth as a stockpile of resources, we look at it as the living organism that sustains us, that cradles us, that we are in relationship with. She talks about an environmentalist named John Muir, who said he cannot pick up a rock or a stick without feeling that he is connected to it and that it is connected to everything. He talks about a guy named John, she talks about a guy, his guy's name is John Seed, and he is part of the Rainforest Information Project. And so he decided that he was going to do something about illegal logging of rainforests. And so he went down, and there was a rainforest, and I forget what part of the world it was, but there was illegal logging going on. And so he stood there in front of these trees, and behind him he had the bulldozers and the police and the bullhorns and the noise and the yelling, and he just stood there, and he had an epiphany at that moment. And she said that his epiphany was that he realized he was not, let me see if I can articulate it well. He was not John Seed standing in front of a bunch of trees. He was that rainforest acting to protect itself in the human body of this man. He felt such a sense of connection and oneness with the trees behind him. That just gives me goosebumps. It's like, no, I'm not me. I am you. And in this human person that you nourished, I am standing here to protect you, and I'm not going to move. Those are the dimensions of the Great Turning. She gives guidance on ways that we can, in our own lives, protect and promote the Great Turning. One of the quotes she gives in terms of this new paradigm is a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. We love Thich Nhat Hanh. And at one point he was asked, what do we need to do to save our world? What can we do to save our world? And his questioners thought that he was going to give a lot of environmental advice. We should do this, we should do that. And he said, what we most need to do is hear within us the sounds of the earth crying. Within us, the sounds of the earth crying. Because those sounds are there. When the earth cries, we cry. When somebody across the earth cries, I cry. Because we are all connected. And when we start to live from that truth, not just in our minds, when it travels the longest journey you can make from your mind to your heart, when it travels there, we will begin to live differently. So here's her thoughts on how we promote and live in this new consciousness of the Great Turning. The first thing she says is to come from a place of gratitude, which is so cool for us because that's what we do. She says, even though the world can sometimes be overwhelming, even though it can be scary, even though we can think, man, I'm not even getting up because I don't know what to do today, when we turn on the computer and see the news, we need to realize that we are so lucky to be here now because it is such a pivot point in human history. What a privilege it is for us to be here and have our voices heard and make a difference. We are all here by divine appointment to bring our gifts to this moment. And we are thankful for that moment. What a privilege to be here and be able to make the difference we can make. It's an honor. So we come from a place of gratitude. The second thing she says is, don't be afraid of the dark. And what this means is that we're going to feel pain. Things are going to happen that are going to give us pain. Because when you come from a place where your heart is open, you're going to feel pain for our world. We're going to feel pain for each other. If we don't, we're not paying attention. So feel it. It's okay. The Buddhists have a concept that we just sit with the pain and we take it into ourselves. We take upon ourselves the pain of our world and we sit with it. And it makes it more sustainable for others. It makes it better. When we do it together, it makes it easier. My good friend and wise teacher Linda Wendt once told me, when you're doing it by yourself, that's when it's hard. It's something we do together. And that's actually her last bit of guidance, which is, I'm flipping here, link arms with others. Link arms with others, just like we do here. This is a group project. We give each other energy, we share creativity. Living in this new paradigm, coming up with this new paradigm, is a group project. And it's richer and it's better, bless you, when we do it together. The other thing she said is dare to vision. Dare to vision. Live large. Follow your heart. Come up with what is your gift to do, because we each have one. Just dare to see it and dare to bring it into reality, because we know everything that is created in physical form is first created here. And until we first see it here, it doesn't show up there. So dare to vision, because nothing's going to happen that is magical unless we dream it first. So dare to do that. The last thing she says, which is what I love, she says, act your age. She brings up the point that, what is it, that song, we're all made of stardust? Every part of us is made from that original boom 14 billion years ago. We are all part and parcel of the universe, every atom of our being. We know it. It's our heritage and our destiny. So act as though we are linked to the past, to now, to the future, because it's the truth. So that is what excites me so much about the Great Turning. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and it's a phenomenon which feels true to me. I will not see it succeed in my lifetime, but what do they say? You plant an oak, but you don't expect to sit under it. It doesn't mean don't plant it. It means we have to plant it. And then we have to expect not to sit under it. We have to expect that others will sit under it, being grateful for the shade it provides. So thank you. And anybody who wants to talk about this more, I invite on Wednesday. Thanks.